Rugby with Hugh Griffin.
Welcome back to Hugh Griffin. It's time to talk to him about the Bulls' quest in Europe. We talked about Jake maybe going for two trophies this time, both the Challenge Cup and the URC title. Bit of a tall ask if you ask me. I've got full faith in Jake. I'm a big believer in him. I was thinking maybe I should ask you what the Bulls are really up against, what they're facing on this overseas leg of this quest of theirs. So first and foremost, welcome back, Hugh. It's always nice to talk to you. And right the day before that big game against Edinburgh, what can the Bulls expect firstly from Edinburgh?
Well, I think that most URC fans would say that the Bulls are a better team than Edinburgh, and I include Edinburgh fans in that. I think they would all say that as well. Edinburgh have been very hit and miss, obviously coached by Sean Everett, who is not popular amongst Edinburgh fans. I know it ended very poorly for him at the Sharks, and a lot of Edinburgh fans don't feel like he's the guy to take them forward. They feel like he's underperformed with the squad at his disposal, and they managed to not finish in the playoff positions last season, despite having a squad that was probably good enough. If you look at what resources they have in, especially the back three, Duan van der Merwe, Darcy Graham. They've got Buffelli as well from Argentina, although he hasn't been fit for a very long time. They've been very hit and miss. They're very home and away. They've only got one away victory this season, which I believe was away at Munster, which was a big shock. But they're very good at home. Although we know that the Bulls are also very good away from home. They've had 5 wins out of 7 away from home in the URC so far. Their only defeat in the Northern Hemisphere in the URC is against my Scarlets team, which I enjoyed very
Yeah,
much.
we were robbed there. Let's make no mistake there with a red card that was never warranted. Yeah, anyway.
Uh, and Tom Rogers humiliated Curly Aronson. But I Edinburgh are a team that are less than the sum of the parts. So I think that the Bulls, like I said, most, if not every URC fan would say that the Bulls are a better team than Edinburgh. It's just about whether this weird home advantage thing that Edinburgh enjoy, they're able to extend that over to the Bulls. But the Bulls have already won in places like Connacht, which is a similar kind of level of place to go in terms of the environment. So I think it's doable. I don't think I could write down on paper a reason why the Bulls won't win in Edinburgh, especially because the Bulls have kind of gotten lucky in terms of their Challenge Cup away games have coincided with when they were due to be up here for the URC anyway. So
Mm.
if they win the quarter final against Edinburgh, they will have 5 consecutive weekends in the Northern Hemisphere, which is a stroke of fortune. That wasn't planned,
Mm.
but it means that they're up here with their proper squad. They can fully focus on it. They don't have to worry about going up and then back and then up again. It's it's fallen for the Bulls, and like I said, their away record to me says that they've got a good shot at picking up some wins whilst you're up here.
You said a lot of things that I want to immediately dive into. And the first one was this 5 week thing. Let's walk us through it. If they beat Edinburgh this weekend, this is now the quarterfinal. They play against Munster in the URC the week after. They play against Glasgow in the URC the week after, and then they play against whoever it might, probably Bath in the semi-final. That's now the fifth. That will be the fifth game in a row. And Jake
Yep.
referred to this in the beginning. But listen, man, this is not walk in the park teams. Munster beat La Rochelle last weekend. Glasgow dismantled Leicester Tigers. Now minus Henko Venter with a bit of a, I don't know what he had, brain fade with an eye gouge. I can't even believe somebody can do that in this day and age. But I mean, these are tough games. They might be lucky in the sense they don't have to fly up and down. I mean, they were very grateful, I suppose, that the Lions didn't beat Edinburgh last week because they would have had to fly back to South Africa to come play them here. But the point is, yes, they're lucky to be there, but all it means is sort of a level playing field with all the European teams anyway, and it's going to be tough games. Put that into context for me a bit.
Yeah, but if you want to be champions, you got to win the tough games, don't you? Like
Yeah, sure.
yes, they are difficult games, especially Glasgow away. That is an extraordinarily tough fixture. But you've got, if you want to be the champions, you've got to be able to beat these teams on a level playing field, as you've just called it. If they're a champion team, you can't just be relying on the Loftus factor to bring home the bacon every single weekend. You've got to be able to beat teams that are in and around your level, which the Bulls should be. The Bulls have been probably consistently the best South African team since you guys came north. You got to the Rainbow Cup final and you've been in and around the finals and semi-finals ever since.
Mm. True.
You've got to be if you want to be lifting the silverware, you've got to be winning these games. And to be honest, you've got to be targeting that Glasgow game because you're up against Glasgow for that second
Mhm.
spot. That could be the difference between a home final and an away final for you guys.
May I remind you of the press conference after the final last year against URC? We waited 2 hours for Jake to pitch up. He was livid. And he said, the day we play against Glasgow in Glasgow, mark that day on your calendar. He was, I mean, he's been setting this game up for more than almost a year now. And remember, he was very upset about the referee, and he says, "Yeah, local crowd, local decisions." And I mean, it wasn't local; it was at Loftus. So the point is, Jake is ready for this game. He's got a point to prove. And I think to a large degree, I was in the press conferences before that USC final, and I said it then, and I've said it many times since. I saw in that press conference the day before the final with Franke Smith there, he knew how to beat Jake. He knew it. He had a smile on his face. I'm a South African. I know I can understand South African, mannerisms, if you want to call it that. And I think Jake's got a score to settle it. That's going to be a big game. I'm looking forward to that one. But talking about Edinburgh, just quickly, you mentioned the home advantage. They're not playing at Murrayfield, are they? Where are they playing?
No, they're playing at the Hive, which is next to Murrayfield. It's like a small stadium by the side of it. It's a bit like in Cardiff. You've got the Cardiff Arms Park shares a wall with the Principality Stadium. The Hive kind of shares a wall with Murrayfield.
Why are they not playing in Murrayfield? Just for me to understand.
Okay, because it looks rubbish on telly. Because Murrayfield is a 50,000 seated stadium and Edinburgh's average attendance is 6,000.
Oh, no, but
I
it's
know,
a
I know,
pitch.
I
Yeah.
know that you guys in South Africa use the big stadiums come what may. In Europe, we don't do that. We like to have stadiums that are an appropriate size. So we like to have like they're
Yeah.
kind of 7,000,
Mm.
8,000 seater stadium for 6,000 fans. And look, I know that South African crowds are actually a lot bigger than what people say. The Sharks get 20 plus thousand, the Stormers get 20 plus thousand, the Bulls get anywhere between 15 and 50,000, depending on who the opponents are. So I know that that's the fact.
Mm.
But yeah, so they don't play in Edinburgh because it's basically too big and it looks rubbish on telly.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I've been, pitching for example, the Lions to play the games at a smaller stadium that could be fuller and looks better and creates a better atmosphere. Last year, the Bulls played the Lions at a small college here between Joburg and Pretoria. It was the coldest I've ever been next to a rugby field, but it was terrible because like you had no atmosphere at all, and that's funny. I would have thought it would be better, but anyway, I digress. The other thing that you said was the Bulls have got the team to beat Edinburgh. The question mark is what team is the Bulls are the Bulls going to be pitching up with? Jake was very clever last week against Bayonne, and he played what we call in South Africa very proudly now called an AB team, not an A team or a B team, but a sort of a clever mixture between the two. And Jake also referred to it as a mix and a match team. Do you think if the Bulls pitch up at this game with maybe a sort of a more B team, let's call it that Edinburgh will still be, they'd still have one over on Edinburgh, or will Edinburgh have a better chance against the Bulls?
No, it'll take your A team to beat Edinburgh. I think if you show up with the B team, you won't get the job done. That won't be good enough. But we're talking about standards here. If I talk about my Scarlets, I expect us to be a team that can beat for top eight. And in order for us to be a top eight team, I expect there to be a level of opposition that we are able to beat. The likes of Connacht, the likes of who do I say here? The other Welsh regions, maybe the Lions. These are the teams that we should be beating. If Bulls want to be a champion team, then Edinburgh is the level of team that you need to be able to beat.
Yeah, but a champion team also means you have to have depth. I mean, let's Jake talked about a net injury loss of 1.5 players per game. Because you lose 2.5, but you get one back typically. So you lose a net.
Jake comes out with these pearls of wisdom every week, doesn't he?
Jake won a World Cup. I rest my case. So, he knows what he's talking about. The point is that I'm saying 5 games overseas, an average of 1.5, he's going to lose 7.5 players. So
No, I'm not going for that. I don't know. I'm not buying into it. Sorry, Amber. It's there's the saying. Oh, we're definitely. How many players did you lose against Bayonne to injury?
that we know of.
Yep.
7.
What, 7 players went off injured
No,
against Bayonne?
I'm joking. I have no idea. They were very quiet about it. Actually, people asked me, and they never said we haven't heard anything from the Bulls about any potential injuries. All I know is that Johan Goosen played with an injury. He's still not fully fit, but he had
Is
to
the
play.
injury his curly hair?
Yeah, that's unfortunately that's beyond his control. But his knees are not back up to scratch yet. I mean, he's not. I don't think he'll ever be back to where he was. The point I'm trying to make is: do you think the Bulls will play Edinburgh with a big full strength team, and then maybe sacrifice one of the other URC games because they're going to be in the top 8 anyway, maybe even in the top 4 for that matter? Maybe the Sharks will overtake them. But do you think that's maybe a calculated risk that they're going to be taking?
Well, that's the question, is if you do want to win both, then you've got to be able to have a squad that works with both. And what you did against Bayonne was you loaded the bench and it worked very well for you. And I think a lot of the starters played very well. I'm watching the clips of the game back. Some of the tries that you scored were very razzle dazzle, particularly the set move for one of the first tries with the cutting back against the line. I thought that was really nice. Like I said, if this, I keep coming back to it. If you want to be a team that wins 2 trophies, this is what you've got to be able to do. And whether that's a case of you have kind of 25 players that you kind of mix and match that are all of a similar level. Of course, you're going to have the likes of Hanekom and Norkia and Papier, who are the clear first choices in that. And whether you start them some weeks and uh, put them on the bench the next weeks, and you've got to pick and choose and be strategic about which games you do that in. That's one thing. But a touring squad is going to be a smaller squad anyway. So most of those players have got to expect to play most of those games. So yeah, it's like a mini tour, a mini 5-match tour. And for me, I think Jake has to put together a team that he thinks is capable of winning every game, which
Well,
means that not picking one fixture that you put the weak team out for. I don't think that's going to happen.
yeah. No, I'm with you, and I think Jake has changed his approach to it a bit. Like I said, the A team and a B team, now A B team, that's a better approach. But let's look at Munster, for example. I think maybe a month or 2 months ago, we would have thought Munster would probably be an easier game. It's not that difficult. But from the heroics they pulled against La Rochelle last weekend, suddenly I look at them as a Bull supporter with, a bit of I look at them differently. They might be a bigger threat than what we anticipated. We've always known Glasgow was going to be a big game, but now suddenly Munster is also a big game, right after a very big game against Edinburgh. So talk to me about Munster. Was that a flash in the pan, a sort of a last hurrah? They won by 1 point, or do you think that they might actually, like they did 2 years ago, come with this end run and then actually end up winning the title? Is that the possibility with Munster?
The game between La Rochelle and Munster was very exciting. It wasn't the highest quality game of rugby that I've ever seen. And La Rochelle are rubbish. They have got no wins in their last 9 games. Munster, for me, were the favourites for that game. I feel like I'm the only person on the planet who thinks that, but I've maintained it for forever. I'm not about to change now. That the form of La Rochelle going into that game was worse than the form that Munster was showing. So Munster, for me, were the favourites. And I think there might be a bit of an emotional hangover with them. It will be interesting to see what happens against not Bayonne, sorry, Bordeaux this weekend. That could go one of 2 ways. Either it's a close game and it exhausts them, both physically and emotionally, or it's a blowout in favour of Bordeaux and that kind of dents their confidence as well. There might be a good chance that they rest players after that game, come what may. Now, Munster's squad isn't the deepest. So the likes of Jack Crowley, Craig Casey, Peter O'Mahony, are they going to be rested after these European fixtures? That's an open question. We don't know. They might be, they might not. Traditionally, this time of year is when Munster come alive. They toil, they have loads of injury crises in the first 2/3 of the season, and then post Six Nations, they go on a run and they challenge for the title. I don't see that happening this year. I don't think they're the same quality of team as they were in the last 2 years. And their line out, man. We've got here a team whose line out is worse than the Bulls. Like, it's statistically the worst line out in club rugby in terms of success. And if you watch it, you can see it's so disorganized. I don't know if you saw in the La Rochelle game, they copied the Springboks double jumper thing
Mm.
where one jumps, catches it, and passes it to another pod that has also jumped. They completely messed it up. It was embarrassing. Like their line out is not good enough. They are not going to win anything with the line out in the state that it is at the moment. And their maul is pathetic. Their driving maul is so easily stopped. It's not up to championship standard. So they're not going to hurt you from that point of view. The Bulls scrum is, in my opinion, and I have stats to back it up, the best scrum in club rugby. So I don't think they're going to hurt you from that point of view
In club rugby or in the URC?
in club rugby.
Okay, that's a big statement.
Yeah, it is, but I back it up.
I agree with you
And
100%, by the way.
and then it's about all the rest around the field. And the question is, who's got the most razzle dazzle, Bulls or Munster? And Munster aren't known for their razzle dazzle. And like I said, if they rest their halfbacks, who knows? The Munster live and die with those halfbacks for me. Craig Case and Jack Crowley are excellent players who elevate the level of the team around them.
Very important point that you mentioned, Nick. When I'm talking about the Bulls, maybe, giving it all against Edinburgh and then maybe suffering against Munster. Munster has to play Bordeaux this weekend. I mean, they're going to be out on their feet next week anyway. So that actually counts in the Bulls' favor, don't you think?
100%. Definitely counts in their favor. I think that whatever happens against what happens this weekend in the European competitions, Munster will have a bigger hangover than Bulls,
Yeah.
regardless of the results.
Okay, the week after now is Glasgow. Can I have a 2-week hangover? Is it at all possible? With the Bulls pitch up in Glasgow, what do you expect there? Where they play that game? What stadium is that at?
It's called Scotstoun, and it's just in Glasgow. I don't think it's particularly close to anything else. It's a very similar, instead of in terms of size, it's very similar to Edinburgh, both artificial pitches, which I know you South African guys don't play on very often.
Or like,
Yeah, nobody really likes them. The Glasgow at home is an extremely hard fixture. They've lost one home game in the league in the last 2 years, and they're extremely strong at home. Glasgow, look, you guys know you lost them in the final last season, an incredibly well coached team. And in terms of what level of team that they will put out for that, I'm not sure because they're not fielding their strongest team at the moment anyway. In terms of they don't have Sione Tuipulotu, they don't have Hugh Jones fit and available. So in terms of which players they feel need rests, they were able to take off all their best players on the 60 minutes against Leicester. So they're not too knackered from that. They've got Leinster this weekend, away in Leinster. Again, you talk about hangovers. You look at those three teams, Munster, Glasgow, Bulls, they'll have a big hangover from that. I'm not sure who Glasgow's game after Leinster is. I'd need to check that, but it's a massively intriguing game, and you will do well to win that, to be honest, because Glasgow are the reigning champions and they are a fantastic team. All of their stats are excellent, but if you can limit them, and if you can come away with that from that game with a bonus point of some type, I think that's a good result.
they play Zebra next weekend
Home or away?
away, walk in the park.
Well, I don't know. Zebra are good these days. They might. I would imagine that Glasgow would send a B team to that.
This Inco Venter, 6 week suspension for that eye gouge. How much will it affect Glasgow, do you think?
I don't know that much. I don't know that much, to be honest. I think they've got options in the back row. Rory Darge wasn't playing against Leicester. Let me just Henko Venter or rugby. Let me just have a look at how many minutes he's got for Munster so far. For Glasgow, sorry, so far. So he's started 9 games this season out of 13 that he's participated in, and he's got 1, 2, 3, 4 games at 8. So I don't think it's going to be massive. He's played the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full 80s, but I think if you're going to lose a player in a position, I think the back row is okay because everyone's got back rowers for days.
Right, and then if the Bulls beat Edinburgh this weekend, just by the way, you know that Sean Everett and Jake White are very good friends. And when Sean Everett was fired by the Sharks, Jake actually helped him out for 6 months here at Loftus. He was at Loftus before he went to Edinburgh. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're very close friends. So that's an interesting one. And then, okay, let's say the Bulls manage to beat Edinburgh this weekend away from home, which I think will be quite an achievement. And then they have to meet up, in theory, probably with Bath or Gloucester, like you said, maybe. Who do you think they're going to meet up with in that semi-final
They
if they
should
beat
meet up
Edinburgh?
with Bath, but Bath are a lot better than every other English team. A lot better. They sit 10 points clear in the Premiership, and I think their points difference is 145 points better after 13 games. So they're averaging something like 11 points better point difference per game than anybody else in the league. So it's a big gap that Bath have. So if you're choosing, you want to come up against Gloucester, sorry. They've got a lot of of Challenge Cup heritage, like we've spoken about before. They've been to 6 finals. They love the Challenge Cup. But the difference about Gloucester this year is that they've got a very strong Premiership campaign. They're currently top 4 in the Premiership, which gets them into the end of season playoffs. Gloucester haven't been in that position for a long time. They've normally been one of the bottom clubs in the Premiership for the last few years. They've had a big turnaround this season and brought in a load of Welsh players. So that's what makes it interesting. It's a big game between Gloucester and Bath. It's a West Country derby in England, so it's a big derby. They're just an hour away from each other. A lot of history in that fixture. And there's a lot of players that go between. Santi Carreras, who plays for Argentina, currently plays for Gloucester, is going to Bath next season. But Bath are interesting, because they're so far ahead of everybody else in the Premiership. Their stats are quite difficult to interpret because the stats that Opta do is all just domestic form. So it's only comparing them to games against other English teams. Now, a lot of their stats are very middling, despite the fact they've won 11 out of 13 games in the Premiership. That not many stats stand out. So they've got very good game line success. All top teams do. They're good at committing multiple tacklers, good at converting line breaks into tries. How much credence I put into that stat in the current Premiership, I'm not sure when they're averaging so many tries per game, over 7 tries per game. That's an interesting one for me. So their scrum success is good, and they are the top team for attacking the blind side. And when I say top team, they're the top team in club rugby for attacking down the blind side. So that's the one that you've got to watch against Bath. That's the thing that they do more than anybody else. They concede a lot fewer points per game than every other team in the Premiership. But interestingly, the Bulls have conceded fewer tries than Bath this season, despite having played a game more. That's a bit of an interesting stat and tells you a bit about the state of the Premiership at the moment, where the team that's conceded the least tries in the Premiership has still conceded more tries than the team that's third in the URC. In terms of things that are not great about Bath, their tackle success and their missed tackles leading to line breaks is quite poor. But how much credence you put into tackle stats is up to each person. They don't score off rolling mauls. You don't need to worry about their rolling maul scoring tries. Finn Russell is everything to them. He's their best player. They got Ben Spencer at number 9 as well. Very important to them. They don't particularly play wide in terms of they don't put the ball through the hands. They use width through the length of the passes rather than going through multiple sets of hands. They don't pass the ball very much. But quite a difficult team to analyze.
Well, Harry's got them at number 6 on the Harry index and the Bulls at number 7. So do you believe in that? Do you think the Bulls are a worse team than Bath is? Even slightly so?
I can buy into that. I think they're close. I wouldn't back Bath to win down in Loftus.
But you wouldn't
But
back the
given that
Bulls
this
to win
game
in
is,
Bath?
given this game is likely to be played in Bath, that makes it interesting. I would say it's an interesting game. I agree with Harry that they are very close.
Okay, and you have to make a call.
Oh, look, I'd want the Bulls to win. And like I said, I promised you that if they do get to the semi-final against either Gloucester or Bath, I will go to that
Oh,
game because
yes.
it's an easy one for me to get to, particularly Gloucester. And if you played Gloucester, I would back you to beat Gloucester because Gloucester are a slightly unserious team. They don't play proper rugby.
But they were played in the Challenge Cup semi-final last year.
And they got destroyed by the Sharks. And
Yeah,
do
but
we
they were
think
in
the
the
Sharks are good?
final. Still, no, the Sharks are not good. I mean, you know what I feel like about the Sharks.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's just for my friend Belinda Glenn, who's a big Shark supporter. I just wanted to get it in there.
So, look, Bath would be favourites against the Bulls. They would definitely be favourites, but I think it would be a very interesting game.
Yeah, and the one thing about, I know what you said about the Bulls have to be a champion team and have to beat it, but it's going to be the 5th game on a 5-week tour of Europe. there are going to be injuries. It's all going to be high-stake games, especially the quarter and the semi. Yeah, I'm with you. The Bulls will probably be on the back foot a little bit when it that far into that tournament. But in terms of the URC, do you think the Bulls have a chance this year to at least get to a semi-finals? Well, they are going to be in the top four, I'm sure of it. So they are going to be in the quarters at least. But semi or final, where do you think the Bulls are going to end up in the URC? From what you've seen now.
I think they've got a very good chance of getting to the final because they're going to be, well, sorry, I'm just trying to think in my head. I definitely expect them to get to a semi-final because you'll get a home quarter-final, and I don't think that any team kind of sixth, seventh, eighth in the URC will go to Loftus and win in a knockout game. I think there's very few teams in the URC capable of doing that. So you'll get to a semi-final, and then if you finish third, you would go away to Glasgow as things stand. Tough game, very, very tough game. So you would be not favourites for that. So if that was to be the case, you would be favourites to get to a semi-final and go out at that stage. I think you'd have a chance, but the likelihood is that Glasgow would win that. If you manage to get ahead of Glasgow and get into second in the league, which you're still within a win of doing, then I would expect you to get to a final, probably away in Leinster, and I would expect you to lose that.
We don't lose against Leinster.
I'm just saying what I think is the likely outcome. I'm not foretelling the future. I'm not making the decision, but I say if I'm a betting man, that's what I would bet on.
Well, I'll tell you what, the one thing about the Bulls and Leinster, whenever it gets to a knockout game, the Bulls just sort of pulls it out of the bag somehow.
Well, if you've got Willie LaRue back, and if you've got whoever else it is back, not Elric Lowe, sadly, but whoever else it is, then you've got a chance. I'm not saying you haven't got a chance.
No, I agree. All right, you thanks, man. I appreciate that. Now I've got a better idea what to expect now. I'm looking forward to this, and I'm backing Jake. I mean, I think he's planned this well. He's thought this through, and I just don't want the Bulls to end up playing against the Stormers, for example, in a quarterfinal. And the Stormers didn't play in Europe, and I'm nothing against the Stormers or any other team for that. But the point is just, Bulls going to be on this very tough tour, and the Stormers are going to have a bit of an easy running. I call it sailing to Table Bay. I said that to Jake, and he said, "Can I quote you on that?" You said that, not me. And I don't want that to happen. It's when you try to go for both and you end up with nothing. It's also not a good thing. The Sharks, I think, have clearly made the choice to go for the URC and stuff the Challenge Cup. They're not even going to bother defending their title. What did you think of that, just as a matter of interest?
Well, based on their league position, the reason that they went for the Challenge Cup last year was because they weren't in the top 8 of the URC, so they needed a way of getting into the Champions Cup. This year, they are going to get Champions Cup through league position, so they don't need to worry about it. The URC, I think, it's fair to say, is seen as more prestigious in South Africa. So I'm not surprised, especially because they had to go up for just 1 week and then back down again. I'm not surprised.
If Jake does now go for the Challenge Cup, would it mean anything? I mean, what's the use of winning it? Like somebody said today in one of our comments said, we're not even partners. We can't share in any of the money. We have to pay to play in this thing. Is it worth it?
Well, why do you play sport?
The specific, we want to win the URC. I'm just saying the Challenge Cup, not the champion, the Challenge Cup specifically.
When's the last time the Bulls won something?
Well, a good point, but I mean, the Bulls played in 2 out of the 3 URC finals so far.
Didn't win them.
We will win them.
I think the Challenge Cup victory would be a great result for the Bulls. I think it would be nice to see them pick up a trophy.
Just as a matter of last question quickly, you're a Wales supporter, and we heard the shocking news yesterday that Cardiff, your flagship team, basically might just go into administration. What does that mean? Administration, we don't know what that means in South Africa, firstly, and secondly, what does it mean for rugby in Wales?
Administration means essentially you can't pay your debts. So you bring in the administrators, which is you bring in people from the outside to come in and figure out how you can pay your creditors with what you've got. The difficult thing for Cardiff is they haven't got many assets. They don't own their ground. I'm not sure if they own their training facility. But the WRU is going to come in and take ownership of them. The exact same thing happened with the Dragons in 2017. They went into administration. The WRU came in and ran them for 6 years until they went back into private ownership last summer. So it's ironic, really, that we had four technically privately owned regions for a very brief period, and now we've gone back down to three. It's a big shock. Basically, what happened with Cardiff was Peter Thomas passed away. Peter Thomas was the chairman and the financial backer of Cardiff. He was putting his hand in his pocket and funding the club. He passed away. That money went away. For a while, it looked touch and go whether they would survive. There was rumors about them merging with the Ospreys. There was rumors about there only being 7 players taking part in training because that's the only number of players that they had employed. They managed to get through that, and then they found a new buyer called Helford Capital, and everyone got quite excited by that. The Helford Capital was supposed to have links with Middle Eastern money. There was guys who were leading it who were boyhood fans of the club. People started talking about them signing Faf de Klerk and things like this. Everyone got quite excited. They were going to redevelop the stadium. None of that happened, although attendances for Cardiff have been going up and results on the field have been going up. And then suddenly this has really surprised everybody. And no one really knows what's happened and what's gone wrong. But the long and the short of it is that the money that Helford Capital promised hasn't materialised. So it's a big shock. And the big problem for Welsh rugby is that we still haven't had the strategy and the professional agreement between the WRU and the 4 regions. It was promised last summer. Obviously, that didn't happen. It's already 10 months late. It was re-promised for last autumn after the autumn internationals. That didn't happen. And the whole founding principle of that agreement is that there will be 4 regions and they will be privately owned. And the big kind of debating point of that deal is how much money the WRU will give to the regions. Now, I'm going to try not to go on for too long because people have literally written books about the state of Welsh rugby, literally written books. It would be a series of podcasts, not just a whole podcast to itself. But the regions are on paper 4 privately owned teams. However, the majority of their funding comes from the WRU. So it's kind of half pregnant, as Andre Pretorius would say. They're neither union owned nor private. They've got a foot in both camps. And agreeing the funding for the regions when one of them is wholly owned by the WRU is very complicated. So it's very up in the air for all of us in Welsh rugby at the moment. And all of us are owed an explanation as to what exactly has gone wrong, because it affects all of us in a bad way.
Just to put it into South African context a bit, which one of the 4 South African franchises would it be similar to, going into, is it like the Stormers or the Bulls, a big team like that, or was it more of a Lions or a Cheetahs maybe even? How big is this team just in your Welsh context? I just want to try and, get some perspective on it.
Stormers, probably. I would say it was analogous to the Stormers. I guess Cape Town is the most populous area in South Africa. I don't know that.
No. Gauteng, Joburg, Pretoria, by far.
Oh, is it? Okay, then. Yeah. Okay, well, apologies. I didn't know that. So Cardiff is the most populous area of Wales, and not having a professional rugby team in Cardiff is incomprehensible. It makes no sense. And that's why a lot of other Welsh rugby fans are quite paranoid at the moment, because they feel that rugby in Cardiff will be protected, and if push comes to shove, it could be at the expense of rugby in other places.
Well, yeah. The Stormers just basically came out of administration. SA Rugby took over the Stormers. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
And well, can't say that it's been a roaring success. But anyway, just where did the Welsh Rugby Union get all their money from that they're now funding all these small teams with? I mean, where does the income come from?
That's a great question. 85% of income for professional unions comes from men's international rugby matches. Selling out the Principality Stadium and the TV rights that go with those games is where the vast, vast, vast majority of the money comes from. This is a sore subject because the regions all had their funding slashed massively in the last couple of years, and the WRU said that the funding was not sustainable. The spending was not sustainable. However, they apparently have the money to take over Cardiff. They've had the money to pay off former chief executives who they had to fire. They've apparently got the money to buy out Franco Smith from his Glasgow contract, is the rumours. They've been boasting recently about the amount of money they pay the women's team, which is not a legitimate boast, really. So it seems that the WRU, when they want to find the money, they can, and when they don't, they say, "Oh, sorry, no, there's no money," and then 2 weeks later they'll be spending a load of money on something else. So it's a very sore subject.
This is sort of a vicious circle. I mean, if you're dependent on your men's team performing well, selling out the right, selling out the stadium, and your team isn't performing well, and you're actually, slowly circling the drain almost, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I mean, your team has been pretty woeful lately. Where's that going? It's only going one way, and it's not the right way. And what's the story that you just threw in there casually about Franco Smith being bought out from Glasgow?
When Wales got rid of Warren Gatland, a question that was asked to Abby Tierney, who was the CEO of the WAU, is how will you get, when it was talking about replacement coaches, the question was asked, how will you get coaches who are under contract with other clubs? And Abby Tierney said there is a pot of money available to buy out coaches from their current contracts. Was something that she openly said.
But why Franco Smith?
Because he was the most pertinent example at the time.
Okay. So there wasn't anything that you let slip there. We are definitely rooting for him to come to Loftus to take over from Jake when Jake retires. I mean, hands off.
Well,
I've said it many times before.
He's when he was asked about would he take the Wales job, he basically said yes. So
yeah, I'd be surprised, to be honest. Anyway, well, that's nice. That was quite interesting. I appreciate it. Sorry to hear that. I mean, it's never good to hear that rugby's not doing well. And also, I hear that there might be a couple of questions asked about the due diligence that was done on this team of investors. Some questions unanswered there as well.
very much so. They passed the fit and proper persons test that was facilitated by the WRU, and they were voted in by 99.99% of Cardiff members voted for the takeover. So, yes, a lot of questions need to be asked, and the fans are owed explanations. Definitely.
All right. May I ask who you're going to be rooting for this weekend? Bulls versus Edinburgh?
I'm rooting for the Bulls because I want to go and see them play against
Yes.
Gloucester or Bath.
Slowly but surely, I'm converting the world to Bulls supporters. Harry was first, you're next. Coming around. Thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you for that enlightening conversation. I like to understand what I'm up against, what Jake's up against. Helped a lot. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.